Welcome to the Selling Show, where we unpack, repack, and break down exactly how top experts sell their ideas, their value, and their services. This is your host, David Newman, and you are in the right place if you want better clients, bigger deals, and higher fees. Do you want to be considered an authority? Not just an authority. How about if you were considered the authority in the niche and the topic and the expertise that you share with the world? Well, luckily, I've got the man, I've got the myth, I've got the legend, Mr. Mike Saunders, the authority marketing and authority sales expert. Mike, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, David. Appreciate you having me.
So let's go back to square one. What is authority and what is authority marketing? And then let's talk about authority selling. You have a whole book on this, and we're going to dive deep into that. But what's this whole concept of authority and why is it important in the first place?
Well, people want to do business with those that they know, like, and trust. We could just stop right there, right? I mean, we've heard that for decades, but how do you develop that know, like, and trust? That's huge. And also, let's tie in the idea that David and Mike are busy, and so are our prospects, and so are our clients. We don't have time to go calmly research every single possible option of whatever product or service that we're looking for and analyze them and rank them. We want to just know, I'm going to go to this person, this company, because I see they're the go-to person, and I see a lot of good things out there about them. And out there might be online, it might be word of mouth, it might be your social media, but that's where it's at. And I think that too many times we just think that if we just put up a good ad or put up a good website, people will come. And that's not. I mean, you've got to have good, clear direction for people, and they must recognize that you're the obvious choice.
Absolutely. Now, this probably collides with all kinds of entrepreneurial fears and misconceptions and things like niching down, things like target market, things like being extremely specific in the people that you're calling out to. And I'm sure, Mike, with your clients and your audiences, the number one thing you hear when you start to say, hey, niche down, get specific, be committed. But Mike, I'm afraid of leaving all this money on the table. What if this one comes in the door? What if I miss an opportunity for this? What if I'm so niche that these other people think I'm no longer for them? Let's talk about some of the fears that some of your clients have and then how we overcome them with rational good sense.
I almost think that the solution to what you just said is you're just going to need to make the mistake yourself and get sick and tired of being sick and tired. Because I went through that myself. I started my consulting firm 14 years ago when I did my MBA in marketing. And I was like, okay, I'm going to do all things marketing. And if you need social media, text message, SEO, website development, I got it. I'm your guy. But then there's all these competitors from these crazy countries that work for pennies on the dollar, and people start comparing you with prices. So I think what happens is you've got to start realizing that you must put that stake in the ground and go, I'm an expert in boom. That's the start. But then I discovered that I'm an expert. I went from marketing consultant to authority marketing strategist. Well, that was not enough. Then I need to go, I now work with, and you just work with different verticals. Not to say you will never work with anyone else, but you just start crafting messages and strategic alliances and maybe joint associations in that realm so that you start learning their lingo, speaking their language. And as soon as you do that and see momentum and traction being built, I think you'll convince yourself.
Now, let's talk, because man, we could go lots of different directions with this. But one thing that occurs to me, again, just channeling our listeners, is, Mike, I love what you're saying. It makes perfect sense from a positioning standpoint. I'm afraid I'm going to get bored. I'm afraid I'm afraid that doing the same kind of thing for the same kind of clients in the same kind of way over and over and over. I like variety. I like different kinds of clients. I like different kinds of challenges. And if they look in the rearview mirror, where they have maybe not been as successful as they would like, they can pick out a couple of favorite clients who are dramatically different from each other. So let's talk about number one, this myth about being bored. And then number two, how do we really choose by looking through the windshield and not looking through the rearview mirror? But first, let's start with how do we not get bored?
So I would say that it's your approach to dealing with that specific type of client. So as an example, I have a podcast called Influential Entrepreneurs. I interviewed you on that, and I have done over 1,000 interviews with entrepreneurs. You would think, same old, same old. How's it going? What's your background? What do you do? How do you do it? Bored. Nope. I get energized each and every single time I interview someone from all different walks of life because everyone has a certain background and nuance that they bring. So I even do a lot of work with realtors, mortgage lenders, and financial planners. You'd think you get bored niching down to that? Nope, because everyone has a unique approach. And then what happens is you start going, oh, hey, I do a lot of work with clients in your industry. Isn't it true that? And they're like, yes. And they get excited. So I would say you think about some of these, the Joe Rogans of the world, the old Larry Kings of the world. They're doing the same thing over and over. You just got to bring your own excitement and spice to it.
Yes. And I think one thing that you're talking about is you've got depth with variety. So out of those 1,000 podcast guests that you've talked to, you may even have the same questions, but they have different answers.
Yeah.
And then the conversation goes in 1,000 different directions. Yeah. You've probably never had the same interview twice because you've never had the same person twice. And same thing, you've never done the same client work twice because you've never had the same client. Similar,
and,
yes,
many times I have a little intake form for the interview, and it's like, hey, what 2 or 3 questions would you like to cover? And so many times I end the interview after we stop recording and I go, David, we successfully did not cover any of the questions you sent in because, man, we went deep on whatever, right? Because, like you think about podcast interview or conversation or sales conversation or interaction with a client. It's not like, what is this? Thank you. What is this? Thank you. It's not just robotic. It is a free flow mastermind approach, fireside chat approach. So whether it's a sales conversation, and let's classify that sales conversation, not sales pitch, not sales, trying to close a sale. It's like learning. It's educating. It's teaching. And I think that too many people think that they're doing a consultative question-based approach, but really they're just blasting, shotgunning to people going, what's this, only to get the information to go, whammy, I'm going to zing you with what I just learned. But in reality, you're learning and chatting and go, oh, have you ever tried this? And you don't want to get off track. But I think that right there becomes the secret to success in a lot of areas, but is being that educator and advocate for the success of your client, prospect, target audience. When they realize that you're teaching them, and maybe even teaching them something that has an aha, they're like, ooh, that's a great point. And then that trust and integrity build up.
For sure. Well, I want to share just a couple of things. I love so many of your sound bites. When building your authority is your number one priority. I wouldn't even have thought that those 2 words rhyme, but of course they do.
Yeah, it kind of goes well.
Let's look at the average consultant, coach, professional services seller. In one light, a consultant is a commodity. An attorney is a commodity. An engineer and architect is a commodity. When you work with these folks, financial people, same thing. Corporate trainers, same thing. What are the DNA? What are the seeds of the DNA that you're pulling out of them and that maybe our listeners can pull out from our chat today that really sets them on a whole different plane of authority positioning?
Until you get to the elite levels, I think that a lot of sales professionals, thought leaders, in that realm have imposter syndrome. And they think, I am good, but I'm just not that, or I guess I am. And that becomes a problem because, like dogs can smell fear and our prospects can smell commission breath. Well, our prospects also can tell when we're not dialed in and confident. And what happens is and haven't you heard this, David? To be a good salesperson, the first thing you have to do is be convinced 100% yourself that your product and your service is the best out there. Well, how do you do that? You've got to just know it because you know it because you know it. And you have to deliver great service and get response back and feedback and reviews and testimonials. And then every single time you get those, and I've got 200 plus on my website, sometimes I just sit back and I'm like, oh, that's good. And you sometimes need to get yourself just reacclimated to what you do, what value you provide. So imposter syndrome, and the way to get over that is continue giving high value. That sometimes can be the very best marketing you can ever do. But what happens is when you take an authority positioning approach to your sales and marketing, that means, and this is something that is such a huge nuance that people don't realize. They think that sales and marketing are the same thing. Wrong. They think that selling is telling. Wrong. And they also think that as long as I know what that customer needs and I just barf it up on them in one long conversation or one PDF, that's going to do it. Wrong. So what happens is in one of my teaching workshops, I talk about this, and I've said this so many times. And literally last week I had someone go, I know that person. In fact, I taught a class all about that person. And so it was really interesting because this is an obscure person. A Canadian philosopher by the name of Marshall McLuhan wrote a book called The Medium is the Message. And one of the takeaways in that is where your content is seen gives as much value, if not more value, than the actual content itself. So David Newman could be selling the solution to X, whatever that is. And it's the best whiz-bang thing ever. And you know that if you have this 3-page PDF white paper thing and it just explains it all, then it's like Katie barred the door. You email that out to your prospect list and they're like, yawn. You put it on your website, they're like, LinkedIn, okay, that's nice. But the minute that you are featured in the media, interviewed on a podcast, or that is in the content of a book, they're like, oh, David, that's pretty legit. So these powerful platforms you can be on when your brand, your personal and professional brand is spotlighted, now what comes out of your mouth is treated that much more important. And yes, you still have to do all those other things. You still have to do the blog post and the email, but you have to make sure that you're perceived as and seen as that expert authority so that then when they're glancing over that stuff, and I say glancing because you know how we're busy. We don't read every word of everything. You've got to write in headlines and white space and paragraph and so that people just get it. And then that draws them a little bit closer to you. And don't tell them everything about everything. Give them these little sound bites, these little morsels, these little breadcrumb trails to draw you closer in together.
Do you love selling? I know, me too. Do you hate selling? I know, me too. Listen, fantastic sales book you got to get your hands on. How do I know? It's mine. That's how. Do It Selling is now available for sale. Grab your copy, grab all the bonuses, all the companion tools, all the training, all the videos that go with it at doitselling.com. See you over there. I want to go back to imposter syndrome and the whole concept of certainty, right? Certainty. So this is somewhat easier. I was going to say easy. This is somewhat easier for you and me, where we do have hundreds of testimonials and success stories and books that we've written. And we still get a little bit down. It's like, I'm going to go to LinkedIn and look at my endorsements. Yep. Right. I'm going to go to my kudos file and look at all those emails and messages. Yep. So someone who is, let's say they're a corporate refugee. They just left a 20-year corporate career, senior VP. They want to go out as a consultant, as an authority. They come to you and they say, Mike, I have this amazing corporate career. I don't know the first thing about entrepreneurship. My certainty is at zero. My confidence is at zero. Right now, I think my authority is at zero. What do you do when you don't have those hundreds of testimonials yet, when you haven't written that bestseller book yet? How would you guide that new corporate VP who's coming to you and says, hey, Mike, I want to go out. I want to hit it big on my own. I don't want to make any mistakes, but right now I got nothing.
I'm an open book. I guide me, Obi-Wan Kenobi. You're my only hope, right?
Yes.
So here's what I say. Begin with the end in mind, Stephen Covey. So understand what you want and what you want to achieve and who you want to serve and how you're going to serve them with value and what is the problem they have that you can solve. Because if you just have like, I'm going to sell a number 2 pencils, it's like, whatever.
So there's a lot of thinking and deciding at the front end of your process.
Strategy, have the solution to the problem that some specific tight niche audience has, and then know what you can do to solve that, and then polish up your messaging to know how to capture their attention. So what I do is I've got this I call it a 3-box system called CATASA, CATASA, competitive advantage, target audience, and strategic alliances. So when you can dial in who your target audience is and know exactly who you want to serve. And then you can have your competitive advantage, know how to articulate how you solve that problem for that target audience. Now you can start communicating with them. And like I said earlier, with authority. So get booked on some podcasts. And yes, you should grab the microphone and start doing videos and lives and all that. But there's a special little extra thing that happens when you are interviewed on a podcast because you are the subject matter expert. And when someone sees Mike Saunders doing a video going, hey, you should, they know I'm promoting me. But when I'm interviewed on something, I'm the subject matter expert. So it flips the table. So you start communicating to your target audience, your true, best, clear competitive advantage. And then what happens is you go take it to the next level and you go, the essay, strategic alliances. Who already has the know, like, and trust with that target audience so that you can reach out to them and go, hey, I was just interviewed on this podcast talking about how I serve target audience, which I know that you already connect with. Can we grab a coffee or a Zoom and I can just kind of get to know you? And then now we can kind of put together something that could be mutually beneficial. So now you might be a nobody, but you are now aligning with a known person in that target audience's world. How did you get their attention? You're like, oh, hey, I'd love to connect with you. Before you even connect, here's this interview where I was featured on talking about, and they're like, okay, that person didn't just blast email me, LinkedIn message me with no benefit at all. They're giving me a little bit of content. I'm going to check that out while I run, drive, whatever. So I think that would be a great place to start. There's about 19 steps in that, but hopefully that gets us started on a conversation.
Yeah, no, totally. Now, I know some of this overlaps with what we just talked about, but you talk and write and coach a lot around the 5 keys, your authority positioning blueprint. Can we just kind of go over those at a pretty high level?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest keys is to know what you know. Like I just said here, know who your target audience is, know what your messaging is, and dial that in. And then here's one of the biggest things that I think that people can relate to. If I said to you, hey, David, what are the top 10 frequently asked questions people ask before they make a buying decision to come in and work with your organization? You could go, oh, yeah, I get these all the time. That's fine. But if you take it one step deeper, and this is a tip of the hat to Mike Koenig's, the old traffic geyser marketing guru, I've interviewed him. He's wonderful. But I learned this from him is the top 10 frequently asked questions and the top 10 should ask questions. When you can articulate those deeper questions that people don't even know what to ask until they're like, oh, that's a good point. Now you've got that content marketing foundation that you can start teaching content on. And every single time you teach on that one point, so let's get it back to authority positioning and getting interviewed on podcasts. When you approach a podcast host and say, I'd love to be interviewed on your show to talk about this one point. So yes, we want to talk about my background and all that, but I want to focus on this. That now shines the light on you as an authority and gives you a piece of content marketing that you can use in your outreach to draw people to you. Because like I said before, if you just have that PDF, people go, whatever. But a podcast interview, they're like, oh, that's interesting. And you weren't all over the place. You were dialed in on that one thing, which is a deeper should ask questions. What if you had a whole series of interviews like that you're using in your email automation outreach and that you're putting on social media and start educating people and each one amplifies the previous one? Don't you think that, yes, that leads people towards you, but one of the other 5 keys is you, and this is something so like a psychological aha. When you might have a hint of imposter syndrome and you start talking about these things and your message gets dialed in for you, you start amplifying your confidence yourself because you're like, oh, man, that was pretty good. And when I sent that out to my audience and they responded back and said, Mike, you did such a great job on that interview. Thank you. You're like, okay, great. So you start bolstering your own confidence, which then comes full circle. And then the next time you meet with someone to talk about sales or whatever that you come at it from a little heightened level of confidence. So I think all of those things, it's that teaching, being an educator, doing it with confidence. And then it kind of comes back to, back to the beginning. You're teaching some more. You see yourself featured on, you get more confident. And then the next time you're meeting with someone, now you're not pushy. You're just like, hey, how can I help you out? What are you struggling with? Let me see what I can do.
Absolutely. And you've got that confidence and certainty, not arrogance, but confidence, yes, and that calm demeanor that is incredibly attractive to people because at this point, you got nothing to prove. You have the goods. If they don't need it, if they don't want it, if they're not going to invest in it, that's not about you anymore. It's about them.
Yeah.
I love that. Let's talk about, because I know you talk about pre-framing and sort of like the indoctrination sequence of what people should be consuming and looking at. before they hop on a call with you, strategy call, discovery call, whatever it might be. My friend John Schumacher, who was another guest a few episodes ago on the Selling Show, he calls it Netflixing. So whenever someone books a call with him, he will send me a specific YouTube playlist. Says, when you get a minute, watch these 5 short videos. They're between 3 and 5 minutes. Some of it's content, some of it's testimonials, social proof, case studies. Some of it's aha insights and surprising, like, oh, I never thought about it that way. When they get on the phone with John, they're 80% pre-sold. In fact, what he often says is, I send them this one playlist, but then they start Netflixing everything else they see on my channel. They start reading my blog. They start finding other stuff that I didn't even send them because I've sucked them into my vortex. Talk about the power of that pre-framing the way that you teach it.
I call that assignment selling. And I learned that phrase from Marcus Sheridan. Have you ever heard of him? In fact, I learned content marketing from him way back in the day. And I will submit to you that there is no such thing as content marketing anymore. And here's why. Because good marketing is content marketing. So you shouldn't call it anything. It should just be good marketing. But the point is, he taught this in his work with doing pools and spas. And he would send people to the website and go, hey, before we come out, I want you to read this article, look at and do exactly what you just said. It wasn't on a video, because I think back when he was doing that, it was all just read this article. But before the salesperson got out to the house, they had already read 2, 3, 4, 5 articles. So I think from an NLP approach, when you can pre-frame your authority, expertise, empathy, all of that, education, now all of a sudden that person that you're going to meet with for the first time comes to that meeting viewing you as a trusted advisor, not as a salesperson. So let's think about that example. Netflixing, whether it's you doing videos, that's wonderful, because I know I mentioned to you, like, when David Newman does a video, it's David promoting David. But when David's interviewed on a show, it gives that extra little air. That doesn't mean that you should never do videos. It just means there's an extra little gold star when you get interviewed because you're the subject matter expert. So have your YouTube channel. I have a series, what I call as a podcast interview showcase. I've got a page where I was interviewed on this Financial Planner TV with all of these other interviews, Fox TV News, and where I interviewed thought leaders and influencers in the financial planning. So I have that same thing. But let's think about something. Isn't it true that we should all be cautious of our time? And if we have an appointment for next week, someone has booked it, hopefully using a Calendly, Schedule Once, Appointment Core, we know when appointment gets scheduled for next week. Aren't we going to send them an appointment confirmation thank you? Yes. Shouldn't we at that point confirm, date and time, but also maybe a PS? Hey, David, I'm looking forward to connecting with you next week just to get to know you. Nothing pushy or salesy, just to learn a little bit what you're looking for. In the meantime, between now and then, I thought you might like to listen to this podcast interview where I was featured talking about how I serve my clients and just my general approach to business. Have a nice day. Well, now it's this boop, boop. And they're like, okay, cool. And maybe in that email signature has some type of social proof, maybe a graphic or as featured on, or maybe a testimonial too. So they're like, okay, this person's pretty legit. It's not coming from a AOL email address. And we laugh at that, but there's people still using Hotmail and Yahoo for business. Come on now.
Yeah.
But anyway, if you do pre-frame that meeting and they listen to that podcast interview, and I will tell you this, most people will not listen to the podcast interview in full, but they're going to click on it. They're going to go, okay, I'm going to listen to that and they get distracted 5 or 7, 10 minutes into it. But guess what? Who cares? Not any other salesperson that they're going to meet with, because you're not the only one that they're evaluating. I'll bet you the other 2, 3, 4 people they're evaluating didn't send them a featured on, interviewed on. They start listening to that and they're like, okay, David knows what he's talking about. They come to that meeting and they're like, okay, you know what? I've got a couple questions for you because I heard that interview and it kind of gets right to the heart of the matter. So reframing, how about this? Most of the time, many times, you're going to have that first meeting and it's a discovery session. And maybe you're going to set a follow-up meeting, bam, right? Book a meeting from a meeting.
Yeah.
And maybe it's going to be for the next week to go, hey, let me kind of gather some ideas and we'll get together Zoom or in person and I'll show you just some thoughts, just see what you think. Maybe the day after or the day they leave the first meeting, you send an email. Thank you for your time. It was great to hear about blah, 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 whatever. Hey, between now and the time we connect next week, we talked about whatever, because now you're learning what they were needing and you go back to your 10 FAQ, SAQ. Maybe you've done several interviews like that and you go, okay, David was interested in boom. Hey, David, when we meet next week, I'm going to show you some ideas. But between now and then, we talked about this. I was interviewed about that very topic, and I thought you might like to listen to this podcast interview where I talk about that in detail. And now they're like, he heard me. Oh, that's interesting. And now it just further deepens that trust that they have for you for the next meeting, which should be the opening of a relationship meeting, also known as closing the sale.
Wow. I love that whole end-to-end sequence. Mike, I would love to kind of go behind the curtain of the Mike Saunders empire and tell us a little bit about your backstory of how you came to the work that you're doing today. And then also, what are the different profit centers and the different sort of avenues that you generate revenue in your empire?
Well, I like that empire. It's like I should have this like evil laugh and wring my hands and like, here we go. So I spent about 12 years in mortgage banking for JP Morgan Chase. And then when the crash happened in 07, 08, it was like evaporated overnight. If anyone was in that time frame, remember that, it was just gone, right? So I went back to, I was at 40 at the time, and I did my MBA in marketing, started my marketing firm, and literally started looking for opportunities to really hone in on that marketing. So like I mentioned to you, I was doing all things for all people. So about 7 years ago, I stopped doing all things for all people and focused on the one thing, authority positioning. And yes, it's marketing, but it's marketing in 3 very specific areas. Because I started noticing that if you confuse people, you are going to lose. And great book, shout out to, Building a Story Brand by Donald Miller, where he says, if you confuse, you lose. We got to be clear. So I started going, you know what, David, if you're looking to get new business, you've got to separate yourself from the competition. You've got to have people see you as the trusted advisor, all of those things we were talking about. So what I do is I position your brand personally and professionally using really powerful platforms of podcasting, publicity, and publishing. And I have a really special way that I put it all together. It's all done for you. It makes it really, really fun. I extract out and draw your story and your competitive advantage just right out of you in a series of podcast interviews. And then I put together this vibrant marketing package where it's just handed to you on a silver platter, and you or your assistant or your marketing admin can just go copy, paste, deploy. And now all of a sudden people are like, wow, that really resonates with me. You said something there. We need to talk. So that's my backstory on kind of coming through the business, because it was something where you got to take a step and then go, ooh, this is, Tony Robbins, constant never-ending improvement. I go, you know what, this is working just not as well, but let me fine-tune this, tweak this. And then now it just comes down to where people need to realize is you take one step forward and then don't sprint, right? Because if you get too much, then you've got analysis by paralysis. So if I hand you this package and I go, here's all you need to do. Here's the content calendar of how to implement everything that I just did for you. Now let's talk in about 60 days and I'll show you what we can do next, because the next step is really fun and easy. So that's kind of how I focus on serving my clients.
Really cool. You whizzed through that really fast. I was very excited. Podcasting, publishing. What's the third P?
Podcasting, publicity, and
publicity.
Publishing. So as an example, I kind of have a little tongue-in-cheek thing where I say SEO is dead. Most people, many people, salespeople don't need to pay someone or entrepreneurs to do SEO, because nobody, if you're a financial planner, they're not Googling best financial planner in my city. They're not doing that to find you. You know what they are doing? They're hearing about you from the gym, church, Rotary, whatever. And they're like, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so. And whether someone hands the card to you or they make a connection, they're going to Google you and your company first. What happens when your name and your company gets Googled? That's huge. That's not SEO. That's Google positioning. That's your Google resume. And so when I interview my clients on my podcast, the platform is so well indexed that we put their name and their company name in the title and the title of the press release. And then we use strategic interlinking so that the podcast points to their website, the press release points to the podcast and to their website, and we embed the interview in the press release so that all of a sudden there's all these signals happening so that when someone Googles your name and your company, it's like, yes, of course we see your website, your social media. That's what I see with everybody. But hold on. Featured in mentioned in the media. Interview on. I'm going to check that out. And so when you do have that meeting, and yes, you're going to send the email and say I was interviewed on, but they're also going to Google you. And that becomes another layer of social proof. So I think that's a huge thing. Podcasting, publicity, and publishing. Publishing takes it to the next level. But the main place where I start is, hey, can you jump on and do an audio interview where I spotlight you, ask you some questions about how you serve your clients and bring out your competitive advantage to show how wonderful you are. It becomes a great door opener for you in your selling career or your business or your speaking or whatever it is. But I just interview you. And then I put together this amazing, positioning, promotion, marketing package. And you look at it and you approve it. And all of a sudden it's like, wow, I spent 20 minutes and I got all of that.
Hey, if you're loving this episode as much as I am, pop over to doitmarketing.com/manifesto and get your free 37-page download guide to how to sell smarter, sell more easily, sell more often. That's what we're here to help you with at The Selling Show. Off you go. I got to watch you because you're really, really good. You just did something super smart that I'm sure you teach your clients also.
I'm sure I did, but tell me.
That publishing thing, well, that's a whole separate thing. But, and it's like, whoa. We got to dig into that. Right. We got to dig into that, buddy.
Okay. So
publishing, talk to me about publishing because now you've whetted my curiosity, including everyone who's listening.
So here's the progression. If I said to you, David, you've got the solution to this wonderful problem. And I know you do. We've talked about that. So what I want you to do is write a 20-page document detailing how you'd freeze up. But if I said, David, why don't we jump on Zoom and do an audio? Because I do all my interviews on Zoom, but audio, because the bandwidth kind of stays down and it keeps people focused on, I don't have to comb my hair and I don't have. Yeah. So we do it on audio interview. But if I said to you, I'm going to do 3 interviews on 3 really specific topics about your business and extract out awesomeness from you, you can talk for 20 minutes on that. Yes, of course. And then after we get done with those 3, didn't you have like 3, 4, 5, 6 more that are like, man, now that we brought up these 3, there's 3 more that would be really impactful to draw people through the buyer's journey. Oh, of course. Yeah. So now we got 6 interviews. You've got 6 powerful, what I call authority positioning assets. I've got a federal trademark on the phrase authority positioning portfolio, which is the culmination of all these assets. Because guess what? Do you know how long a Facebook ad campaign lasts? As long as you keep paying Facebook. When it stops, it poof goes away. But assets are permanent. So when you have these 6 interviews and all of the marketing that goes with it, and then I go, hey, David, you ever gone to a big conference and you see the keynote speaker and they've got, now introducing Amazon bestselling author David Newman. And you're like, oh yeah. Well, could you write a book? Of course not. I can't even write a email, much less a blog post, much less a book. I said, well, those wonderful 6 interviews we just did and we really taught your audience how you solve the problem of. What if I just wave my magic wand and go, poof, you're an Amazon bestselling author. You don't never need to lift another finger. And you're like, oh, keep talking. So what I do is I take those strategically defined topics that were in the podcast episodes and I go transcribe, clean it up, put it through a process of editing and proofreading, send it to you and you've got a manuscript. And it's lead generation, it's business development, maybe some call to action throughout there, maybe some testimonials, maybe an implementation workbook at the end of each section so that it's like when you taught this thing, now people can, hey, take a quick minute and so it becomes this really neat, living, breathing lead generation document. But you've done nothing but been interviewed, which you're getting benefit all along the way. And then I log into your Amazon account and publish your book for you. And then when I'm done with everything, it's your book. You earn all the royalties. I don't have any control of anything. And a lot of these companies that do this, you find out too late. And it's like, if I need to order more books or change this, or it's in your publishing account. But what I do is I just facilitate it for you. So I'm just like the Cyrano. I make you look amazing. And then I log in, I publish the book and you've got a professional cover and you've got everything wonderful. And you've got the Kindle and paperback and hardback and then a press release talking about you launching the book. And then I run a bestseller campaign and you're an Amazon bestselling author and you never wrote a word.
Wow. Very, very cool. Now, I'm just curious, one little detail about the Amazon strategy. Is this a free book? Are we trying to get lots of eyeballs and lots of downloads? Or is this like 99 cents, $9.99? How much is it?
Well, you could not be an Amazon best-selling author giving away free downloads because then you're an Amazon best giver awayer.
Right.
So yeah, the strategy is you launch on Kindle, you set it at 99 cents, and then you pick I've got a computer algorithm that picks the best categories, the best keywords, and then we zero it in and we do this big campaign. But it's paid. But you said you put it on sale. You do 99 cents. I just delivered a book package today for a client and we're having a call next week. And then now it's like, okay, now that it's done, what do you want the Kindle price to be? What do you want to sell that for? So you just do it temporary, but it's not free because then you're not a best-selling author. You just had a bunch of people download a free book.
That's right. I love that. Really, really great. Wow. Well, let's talk about the authority selling book. What kind of person should pick up the book? Who did you write that for? And what will we find inside the golden pages of authority selling?
I think if we took and transcribed what I've said already and we took it and overlaid it over what's in the book, it's going to be like, ooh, because I find myself, I'll go back and I will read over my books. I've got like 4 or 5 published and I'm like, you know what? I find myself saying that all the time. So what's in the book is how to use authority positioning to pre-frame your expertise and sell better. And it's not a pitch for anything. It's just pure, helpful teaching. It's for entrepreneurs, business owners, thought leaders, anybody that needs to sell their ideas. So it really does take a methodology of here's what you could be doing, exactly what we've been saying here. And it doesn't matter whether you're a doctor, lawyer, chiropractor, financial planner, entrepreneur, thought leader, because we all need to articulate our message really, really well, but then fight through the crowd and the clutter and be heard. Because there's some people out there that have got a wonderful solution to some problem, but they just don't know how to get it out there and rise above the crowd. So in the book, Authority Selling, it just is talking about the methodology, the framework, the foundation, how to get, the frequently asked questions, the should ask questions, some ideas like how to get free publicity, how to get free podcast interviews, a lot of DIY stuff. So, I mean, it's very, very helpful to, and it's got the integrated workbook, like I mentioned, like, hey, at the end of this chapter, what are some 10 frequently asked questions you can have about your business or product or service?
Brilliant. Well, I've got 2 final questions here as we're landing the plane. The final question is, where can we send people to get some downloads and goodies and resources? Before we get to that, though, second to last question, if folks were to take one overarching concept from our entire fantastic discussion about authority positioning and authority selling, what would you hope that one core idea or takeaway would be?
I kind of think that little snippet soundbite that you mentioned earlier, it kind of really is something I use a lot. Building your authority is your number one priority.
Yeah.
Because when it is done right, it further separates yourself from the competition. Each and every little asset that you build out there, each and every time that you get it out to your audience. And just as an example, I practice what I preach. So I'll give you a couple, things to download and get. But you'll see that it's like, oh, you know what? If you could hit rewind in real time and see what I was doing right before our interview here today, I was going into my social media, my LinkedIn, my website, and my email autoresponder. And I put in there, hey, I was just interviewed on, and I just put together this compilation of interviews with other thought leaders. Thought you might like to take a listen to that. Here's the link, no opt-in necessary. And it's like, even with 200, even with all the things we have, you've got to constantly be doing that. So I think the one big nugget is building your authority is your top priority, because when it's done the right way and you just make it a habit. Do you think that after 200 reviews and testimonials, I'm like, okay, I'm good? No, you just keep going. So I think that's a big takeaway people must realize, because anything else you do, I'm doing and you can list all kinds of sales activities. Your competition does the same thing. You've got to do something that's a little bit different that elevates your personal and professional brand.
Totally. It's so funny that you mentioned elevate, because what I was going to encourage people is, and I want to endorse everything that you're saying, Mike, and your whole approach. This is like, you could climb the mountain, or if you embrace the authority selling methodology, you can get in the helicopter. So people are like, Mike, I don't have time to get in the helicopter. I'm just going to keep on going up here with my sneakers up the mountain. It makes everything else easier, people.
It's funny you said that, because a lot of times people are like, how many times do we get in our Facebook feed or email feed like, oh, the next best whiz bang marketing sales? I am saying to you, what I am proposing with authority marketing, authority selling, that concept is not a replacement for everything else you do. Stop doing this and start doing my thing, because my thing, But when you have that authority position, everything else you're doing will work better.
Makes it so much easier, better and easier.
Correct. We have an opt-in for a webinar, and it's like, as featured on, as seen on. And when you're trying to get people to show up to the webinar and you're sending out, hey, thank you for registering and thought you might like to listen to this interview. They're like, okay, that's legit. And your opt-ins are going to increase. Your conversions are going to increase. So anything else you do is going to work better when you're seen as an authority. So this is not I'm the only one doing this, so do my thing and stop doing everything else. It's just like, you better have this in place.
Yeah. Amen. Amen times 10. Mike Saunders, where can we send people to get connected and stay connected to more Mike brilliance?
Yes, thank you, David. So if you want a free copy of my book, Authority Selling, just go to authoritysellingbook.com. Just pay shipping. I'll send a copy of the book out to you, a paperback, actual real copy from Amazon. And then also right here in my background, MikeSaunders360.com, where you can get all the highlights of my social medias, my podcast interviews, my Forbes articles. And then my main website is authoritypositioningcoach.com.
Excellent. And all of those links will be directly one click away in the show notes under this episode at thesellingshow.com. Mike Saunders, you're a rock star. I appreciate you. So many value bombs today. Thank you so much.
Thank you, David. Appreciate you having me on.
And that wraps up another episode of The Selling Show. Hey, tell you what, if you like us, rate us and review us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe, tell a friend, go grab the notes and downloads and extras at thesellingshow.com. See you next time.